Welcome back to another video. Today's story takes us deep into the dry, unforgiving lands of the old American frontier, a place where loneliness was a man's only shadow, and survival came at a price. But this time, it isn't about gunfights or gold. It's about a poor rancher who thought he'd lost everything, until one strange marriage changed his life forever. People in the small town of Dust Creek still whisper about the day Caleb Turner, a humble ranch hand with nothing but a shack and a single cow, was forced to marry a stranger. They said she was an obese woman from the edge of town, with no family, no past, just a quiet gaze and a deal that made no sense. The marriage wasn't for love. It wasn't even for money. It was for a single cow. That evening, under the orange glow of a dying sun, the town's preacher read the vows. Caleb looked pale, defeated, but the woman beside him stood tall, silent, her eyes unreadable. And when the ceremony ended, something strange happened. She turned, looked him dead in the eye, and whispered the words that would haunt him forever. "You'll thank me one day for saving your life." No one knew what she meant. But the next night, when the door of Caleb's shack locked from the inside, the truth began to unfold in ways no one could have ever imagined. The night after the wedding was colder than usual in Dust Creek. The wind howled through the gaps of Caleb Turner's wooden shack, carrying the faint smell of dust and smoke from the hills. Inside, the lantern flickered weakly, casting long, nervous shadows across the walls. Caleb sat on the edge of his bed, still wearing his worn-out boots and hat. He stared at the woman who now sat quietly across the room, the stranger he had just married for a single brown cow. Her name was Martha Lee. That's all the preacher had said before the ceremony. No past, no family, just a name. She had a large frame, a round face, and thick dark hair braided down her back. Her dress looked newly stitched, but her boots were caked with red dirt, as if she'd walked miles to get there. And those eyes, those deep, knowing eyes, seemed to see more than she ever spoke. Caleb cleared his throat. "You can take the bed if you want," he muttered, voice rough from dust and shame. "I'll sleep out by the barn." She didn't move, didn't even blink. Then, slowly, she rose to her feet, turned toward the door, and slid the heavy bolt into place with a sharp click. Caleb froze. His hand drifted toward his hat, his pulse rising. "Ma'am?" She looked at him, her face calm, her tone flat. "No one leaves tonight." He stood, half in disbelief, half in fear. "What do you mean?" "It's my house." Her voice didn't rise. "Not tonight, it isn't." For a moment, only the wind outside spoke. The shack creaked and moaned as the cold crept in. Caleb stared at her, confused and angry, but something in her eyes stopped him. Something that wasn't madness, but purpose. She wasn't threatening him. She was protecting him. Martha stepped closer to the small window, peeked through the cracked shutter, and whispered, "They're already here." Caleb frowned. "Who's here?" She turned slowly toward him. "The men who were going to kill you." The words hit him like a hammer. He stepped back, his boots scraping the floorboards. "Kill me? Why? I ain't done nothing." She walked closer, her expression steady. "You did something without knowing. You bought a cow that didn't belong to you." Caleb blinked. "That cow was part of the deal. Old man Fletcher gave her fare." Martha shook her head. "Fletcher stole it." From the Black Crows, Caleb's heart sank. The Black Crows, a ruthless outlaw gang that ruled the desert with blood and bullets. If he had their property, even by accident, they wouldn't care about fairness. They'd come for revenge. And suddenly the silence outside felt wrong. Too quiet. Martha motioned toward the floor. "Stay low." She moved with surprising speed, her size hiding a strength he hadn't expected. She reached into a small leather satchel and pulled out a worn revolver. Caleb gawked. "Where'd you get that?" "Doesn't matter," she said, loading a single bullet with a metallic click. "What matters is staying alive till morning." Through the crack in the window, Caleb saw faint shapes moving in the darkness. Horses, torches, and men. He whispered, "They came all the way out here." "For one cow." Martha's voice turned low and grim. "That cow's not just livestock, Caleb. There's something hidden inside her saddle mark. Something they'd kill anyone to keep secret." Caleb swallowed hard. "What the hell did I marry into?" Martha glanced at him, a faint, sad smile forming for the first time. You married your best chance at living. Then the first gunshot shattered the night. Glass splintered. The lamp fell. Caleb dove to the ground as the bullet tore through the wooden wall. Outside, horses neighed and boots thundered. Voices yelled, rough, cruel laughter echoing through the canyon wind. Martha crawled beside him, whispering, "Don't move. They'll think we're dead." The next few minutes stretched into eternity. The attackers circled the shack, shouting and laughing, testing the door. Finally, one of them spoke loud enough to hear, "Bring us the cow, Turner, and we'll make it quick." Caleb held his breath. Martha's grip tightened on the revolver. But when the voices faded into the darkness again, she turned to him and said, "Tomorrow, at sunrise, we leave this place, and you're going to find out why that cow was worth your life." By dawn, the gunfire had stopped. The outlaws had ridden off, leaving only silence and a half-broken door swinging on its hinges. Caleb sat by the ashes of the lamp, exhausted but alive. The smell of gunpowder still lingered. His shack, his only home, looked like it had survived a war. Across from him, Martha Lee, the strange, heavy-set woman he had been forced to marry, reloaded her revolver with steady hands. Her face was calm, almost too calm for someone who just stared death in the eye. "You sleep?" she asked. Caleb shook his head. "Couldn't if I tried. My whole life just burned up in one night." She looked up from the gun, her expression unreadable. "Then it's time you start another one." Caleb rubbed his forehead. "You mind telling me what the hell's going on? What's so special about that cow?" Martha stood, walked to the barn door, and opened it slowly. The morning sun spilled across the yard, touching the fields with gold. The cow, brown and calm, chewing on a scrap of dry grass, stood in the pen as if nothing had happened. "Come on," Martha said, stepping into the barn. "I'll show you." Caleb followed, cautious but curious. She knelt beside the cow, patted its side gently, then lifted the animal's tail. Underneath, near the left flank, Caleb noticed something odd. A faint circle branded into the hide, but not like a normal ranch mark. It was a symbol. 2 crossed feathers over a crescent moon. Caleb frowned. "That ain't a brand I've ever seen." "It's not a ranch mark," Martha said quietly. "It's a sign of the Apache traders. They used it to mark shipments. Gold, medicine, sometimes messages." He stared at her. "Messages? A cow?" She nodded, eyes still fixed on the brand. "There's something buried under her skin. A hollow metal case, maybe the size of a coin. They used to hide messages like that when the army tried to stop them from crossing the border." Caleb felt his throat tighten. "So you're saying this cow's carrying a message worth killing for?" Martha stood up, dusting her hands. "Not the message. The name on it." He blinked. "Whose name?" She hesitated. "Mine." The words hit him like a bullet. Caleb stepped back, stunned. "Yours? Why the hell would your name be hidden in a cow?" Martha turned away, staring out over the desert horizon. "Because I used to work for the men who run the Black Crow gang. I smuggled their messages across the territory. Until I found out what they were really doing." Caleb swallowed. "And what was that?" She looked over her shoulder, her eyes dark and distant. "They weren't just outlaws, Caleb. They were working with army deserters, trading weapons for land. When I tried to warn the tribes, they marked me for death." A long silence hung between them. The only sound was the cow's slow breathing. Finally, Caleb said, "So you married me. To hide from them?" Martha shook her head. "No. I married you because the only way to protect that message was to make sure no one suspected who I was. Poor rancher, a quiet wife, but no one would look twice." He looked at her, still trying to piece it all together. "And the cow?" "I paid Fletcher to sell her cheap. I needed her close. You buying her just made it perfect." Caleb let out a shaky laugh. "Perfect? You got me shot at by outlaws and trapped in my own house." For the first time, Martha almost smiled. "You're still alive, ain't you?" He shook his head, exasperated. "Lady, you might just be the strangest woman I've ever met." Her smile faded. "Strange or not, if we stay here, we die. They'll be back, and this time they won't leave till they've skinned the truth out of both of us." Caleb stared at her for a long moment. Then, reluctantly, he nodded. "What's the plan?" "We ride south. There's an old Apache settlement in the canyon. People who still owe me their trust. If we can reach them before sundown, we'll be safe. He frowned. Safe? You mean you think they'll protect you? After you ran with the Black Crows? Her eyes softened. They'll protect me. Because I saved their children. Caleb didn't know what to say. There was too much about this woman he didn't understand. Too much danger in her calm. Too much truth in her silence. So he just nodded again, quietly. All right. But if I end up dead, I'm haunting you. She gave a small, tired chuckle. Fair enough. They packed quickly. A canteen, a few rations, and a single rifle. Caleb saddled his horse. Martha climbed onto the wagon with the cow. As they started down the dusty trail, Caleb looked back at the shack, his life, his home. Now nothing but a pile of memories and holes in the walls. Ahead lay miles of desert, a trail of outlaws and a woman whose secrets ran deeper than the sand itself. The sun climbed higher. The heat shimmered. And somewhere, not far behind, black smoke began to rise again. The Black Crows had found their trail. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, a sea of gold and dust shimmering under the ruthless sun. Caleb's shirt clung to his back, soaked with sweat. His horse snorted, tired and restless. Behind him, the wagon creaked along, the brown cow lumbering lazily as Martha held the reins with quiet strength. They had been riding for hours, leaving Dust Creek far behind, but the sense of being followed never left them. Every distant echo, every circling buzzard made Caleb's hand drift toward his revolver. Think they're still on us? He asked over his shoulder. Martha's voice came steady. If they aren't, they will be. The Black Crows don't give up. Caleb glanced back. The horizon was empty, but the unease gnawed at him like hunger. He tried to push it aside. You sure this canyon of yours even exists? She nodded. It's not far. Just beyond those red cliffs. As the sun began to dip, the air turned cooler, the light turning a deep amber. Long shadows danced across the rocky ground. Finally, the land sloped downward into a narrow canyon, tall cliffs rising like walls on both sides. They entered slowly. The air grew still, silent except for the sound of hooves on stone. Caleb whispered, "Don't look like anyone's lived here in years." Martha didn't reply. Instead, she raised her hand, signaling him to stop. She dismounted, walked a few steps ahead, and knelt beside a flat rock. With careful hands, she brushed away the dust to reveal something carved into the stone. 2 feathers crossed over a crescent moon, the same mark as on the cow. Caleb frowned. That sign again? Martha's tone softened. This is sacred ground. The Black Crows fear it. But the people who once lived here, they called it the Valley of Echoes. He looked around, skeptical. And they're just gonna help us? After everything? They owe me, she said simply. And if they're still here, they'll come. Caleb didn't ask how she knew. There was something about her tone, the quiet certainty, that made him trust her despite everything. They waited in silence as twilight deepened. The sky turned purple, stars blinking to life one by one. The cow lay down beside the wagon, calm and tired. Then from the cliffs a faint sound echoed, a rhythmic drumbeat. Caleb's hand went to his gun. What's that? Martha didn't move. They heard us. Moments later, shadows appeared at the canyon's edge. Tall figures, faces painted in white and red, feathers fluttering in the wind. Native warriors. Caleb froze. There were at least 20 of them, silent as ghosts, their eyes sharp, their weapons gleaming in the starlight. One of them stepped forward, an older man with deep lines across his face, wearing a headdress of raven feathers. His gaze fixed on Martha. White woman, he said in a low, steady voice, you return after all these years? Martha bowed her head slightly. Chief Aleno, she said softly. I had no choice. The chief's expression darkened. You left us. You took their silver and vanished while our sons died fighting for peace. Caleb's gut tightened. He whispered, what's he talking about? Martha didn't look at him. Her voice broke slightly. I was their translator once. I carried their messages. I thought they were peace terms. But the Black Crows twisted my words into a trap. I didn't know until it was too late. The chief's eyes burned with grief. We lost 12 men that day, she nodded. And I've carried their ghosts ever since. Caleb wanted to step in, to defend her somehow. but the air between them was heavy with pain too old to touch. Finally, Martha raised her hand. "Chief, the cow carries something. Proof that the Black Crows plan to destroy more villages. It's hidden under her brand. If we can get it to the fort, we can stop them," the warriors murmured among themselves. The chief's gaze turned to the animal. "Then you bring danger to my valley once again." "Only if we stay," she said. There was a long pause. The chief looked at her, then at Caleb. "You trust this man?" Martha hesitated, then nodded slowly. "With my life." The chief studied Caleb for a long moment before finally speaking. "Then the path to the east is open. But go before the moon reaches its peak. The crows follow your trail. They will not stop." Martha bowed her head. "Thank you." As they turned to leave, the chief added quietly, "You cannot undo the past, Martha Lee, but you can choose how the story ends." They rode out of the canyon under the pale light of the moon. Silent and thoughtful, Caleb glanced at her. "You really were one of them, huh?" She nodded. "I still am. Just not on their side anymore." He shook his head. "You risked your life to warn them. To save strangers, why?" Her eyes glistened in the moonlight. "Because no one warned me when my family burned." Caleb didn't ask more. He didn't need to. The desert wind carried enough ghosts already. But as they rode east, toward the promise of dawn, a flicker of torchlight appeared far behind them. Too many to count. The Black Crows had found their trail again, and this time, they weren't coming just for the cow. They were coming for both of them. By the time the moon climbed high, the desert had turned silver. The wind cut sharp across the canyon trails, whispering warnings that came too late. Caleb could hear it behind them now. The thundering of hooves, the cries of men, the rising rage of the Black Crows. Martha cracked the reins. "Keep your head low," she shouted, the wagon jolting over the rough ground. The cow bawled in panic, its hooves skidding in the dust. The wooden wheels screamed against stone. Caleb fired his revolver backward. One shot, two. Flashes of orange light tearing through the dark. The outlaws' torches flared in the distance, a fiery swarm closing in. "How many?" he yelled. Martha's eyes stayed on the path. "Too many?" They raced along the narrow ridge, cliffs on one side, open desert on the other. The sound of the Black Crows echoed like thunder, closer every second. Caleb reloaded, breathing hard. "If we get cornered," Martha cut him off. "We won't. There's a passage up ahead near the dry riverbed. Leads straight to Fort Dalton." He looked at her. "And you sure about that?" Her lips tightened. "No," the wagon hit a rock, jolting violently. The cow lurched, rope snapping loose. The animal stumbled, then bolted off the trail, vanishing down a slope. Caleb cursed. "The message?" Martha yanked the reins. "Go after her." "I'll cover you!" Before he could argue, she leapt off the wagon, rifle in hand, firing toward the riders closing in. The shots cracked through the night, echoing off the canyon walls. Caleb chased the cow down the slope, dirt sliding under his boots. The animal had collapsed near a dried creek bed, trembling, sides heaving. He knelt beside her, heart pounding. "Easy, girl. Easy." That's when he saw it. The faint glimmer beneath the brand, a thin line of metal catching the moonlight. He pulled his knife, hands shaking, and carefully slid along the scar. Inside, hidden under layers of skin, was a small metal tube, no bigger than his finger, sealed tight with wax. He pried it open, and inside was a single folded paper, stained but intact. He unfolded it under the moonlight. It wasn't a map. It was a ledger, names, dates, army officers, gang leaders, ranch owners, every man in the territory who had betrayed his people, and how much gold they'd been paid for it. Caleb stared at it, realization hitting him like a bullet. This was the Black Crows' contract list, proof that half the county's powerful men were buying land with blood money. Footsteps crunched behind him. He spun, revolver up. Martha stood there, blood on her sleeve, breathing hard. "You found it?" He nodded, holding it up. "You were right. This'll hang every one of them." Before she could reply, a voice thundered from above the ridge. "End of the road, Turner!" The outlaws were here, at least 20 of them, led by a tall man in a black coat with a scar down his jaw. His grin glinted in the firelight. "Well, if it ain't the runaway bride," he sneered, gun drawn. "You should have stayed dead, Martha." She raised her rifle. "And missed the pleasure of watching you fall?" He laughed. Kill them both. Gunfire exploded like thunder. Caleb dove behind a boulder, bullets sparking off the rocks. Martha rolled into cover beside him, returning fire with calm precision. The night became chaos. Dust, smoke, and echoes of death. Then a bullet hit Martha's shoulder. She cried out, dropping her rifle. Caleb grabbed her arm, dragging her behind the rock. "You're hit." "Just a graze," she gasped, face pale. "Get that paper to the fort, Caleb. That's all that matters." He shook his head. "Not without you." She looked at him. Pain in her eyes, but also something deeper. "You're the only one they won't suspect. You can make it?" He clenched his jaw, torn between fear and fury. "You saved my life once. I ain't leaving you to die." Her hand shot up, gripping his collar with surprising strength. "Then don't die for me. Live for something bigger." The words froze him. The same tone, the same fire that had made him listen to her that first night. More shots rang out. The outlaws were closing in. Martha took one last breath, picked up her fallen rifle, and said quietly, "When I start shooting, you run." "Don't run, Caleb!" She stood, firing again and again. Every shot deliberate. Every second she bought carved from her own fate. Caleb turned and ran, clutching the paper, sprinting through the dust and moonlight toward the east ridge. Behind him he heard the screams, gunfire, horses, chaos. Then one final, thunderous explosion. He stumbled, turned just in time to see a flash of orange flame tear through the canyon. The wagon, the gunpowder inside, had blown apart, consuming everything in a storm of fire. The sound faded, leaving only wind and silence. By dawn, Caleb reached Fort Dalton, his clothes torn, his heart heavy. He handed the ledger to the soldiers, barely able to speak. Within days, the names in that paper shook the entire frontier. Arrests, hangings, and justice long overdue. The Black Crows vanished into legend. Their empire burned to dust. Months later, when spring returned to Dust Creek, Caleb came back to rebuild his shack. But before he did, he walked to the canyon, to the place where she'd fallen. There, among the blackened rocks, he found something glinting in the dirt. A single silver locket. Inside was a faded drawing. A man, a woman, and a little girl. He realized then that Martha hadn't been running from her past. She'd been running toward redemption. Caleb buried the locket beneath a wild rose bush, whispered a prayer, and looked toward the rising sun. For the first time, the silence of Dust Creek didn't feel empty. It felt earned.